Of course, I'm gonna talk about the aftermath of last night's fight, the controversial fight with Gary Russell Jr. You know, before I start, I'm gonna make this very clear. Please don't come on my channel talking about what some other dude said on their channel concerning the fight. This is my opinion, not anybody else's. So don't come on here comparing my opinion to somebody else. Go take that instigating crap somewhere else. Keep it off my channel. And if you piss me off too much, I'm just going to remove you from the channel or have the moderators remove you from the channel. It's that simple. We going to have a real conversation about this, and I'm going to keep it 100. I expect y'all to keep it 100. No personal feelings involved, and let's not try to make this, for real. Because I'm really, mad about what happened with Gary Russell Jr. Nothing against Mark Masayu, but he needs to do the right thing and give Gary Russell Jr. a rematch. Or, better yet, the WBC needs to order a rematch. Because Gary Russell Jr. deserves that kind of respect for being a 5-year champion. He clearly fought with one good arm, one good hand. And some people still thought he did enough to get a draw. Some people thought he won. Now, me, myself, I gave it to Mark Masayu just only off activity. But at the same time, Masayu almost blew that fight because there were times where he just wasn't active enough. But he won. I gave it to him. I had it 8 rounds to 4 for him. But then for him to sit up there and say, well, I don't know if I'm going to give him a rematch. It's up to my team. I can fight anybody I want. That's weak. But at the end of the day, this also falls on the representatives of Gary Russell Jr. Case in point, the PBC. I told you I'm going to say what other people are afraid to say. I'm not worried about backlash. I'm not worried about people getting mad because this needs to be said. While everybody straddled the fence on, well, I don't know if I should say it. I'm going to say this. Anthony Joshua got a rematch versus Andy Ruiz. Eddie Hearn made sure that happened. And then it looked like he's getting a rematch versus Uslik. So don't you think Gary Russell Jr. should get the same respect? Now, we know he's been at odds with the PBC and Al Heyman for a while. This is just documented. It's no secret now. And it is what it is. But it kind of makes you wonder what's the screws put to Gary Russell Jr. And it just have you thinking like, okay, Gary Russell Jr. shouldn't have had to fight with a bum shoulder. And you saw that his shoulder was messed up. But see, here's the thing. You got people saying that Gary Russell Jr. needs to shut up and take his loss. He actually he pretty much is taking his loss like a man. And then once again, Gary Russell Jr. ain't getting called a warrior. Like I said, it is what it is. And don't nobody come on here talking about, well, I don't think race plays an issue in this. Of course it does. Because y'all ain't calling Gary Russell Jr. a warrior for going out there fighting with one arm. But you calling Pacquiao one. Actually, he did. Hey, listen, bro. Don't come on here with that, bro. Didn't I tell you don't come on here with that? If he doesn't fight, he might possibly get stripped. So don't come on here caping, bro. Don't try me, bro. You on the wrong channel. I told you. This ain't up for debate. Go somewhere else if you want to debate. I guess you think I'm joking. So here we go. Damn. I ain't trying to hear that. Ain't trying to hear that crap. So don't come on here. Nah, what you mean he chose? Okay, so, right, when Manny Pacquiao got to make his excuses, when Lomachenko got to make his excuses, right, they chose to fight, right? So, bro, don't come on here, Cape, and get out of here, bro. Clearly, the dude had an advantage. Give him a rematch. Let Gary Russell fight at least 80% with both his shoulders intact, both his arms intact. So don't come on here with that cape and stuff. Go somewhere else, you clown. Ass out of here, bro. So I ain't trying to hear that stuff, bro. Don't come on, like, for real, bro. Don't come on here trying to act like you talking logic. At the end of the day, give the dude a rematch. That's the right thing to do. When people thought Andre Ward lost to Sergey Kovalev, Andre Ward ran it back. When he was talking retirement, oh, no. Andre Ward, if he don't give Sergey Kovalev a rematch, he's a coward. So how come those same rules don't apply for Mercedes? So I don't want to hear about Gary Russell Jr. chose to fight. He had to fight, dude. You are a clown, because you're trying to come on here and trying to debate. Like, bro, go somewhere else with that crap. Just shut up and listen. I'm the host, not you. So don't come on here talking about Gary Russell Jr. chose to fight. Man had a 2-year layoff. So all I'm saying is, how come Gary Russell Jr. don't get the same respect for being a warrior? Like I said, these dudes always try to come on here trying to look for attention and stuff. So at the same time, like I said before, Masayu needs to give Gary Russell Jr. a rematch. That's the right thing to do. Let Gary Russell Jr. fight at full strength. So I don't want to hear about he signed a contract. He did have to fight. He did have to fight or get stripped of his title. What is you talking about, dude? You don't understand boxing. So like I said before, Gary Russell Jr. should get a rematch, flat out. Don't sit up there and say it's up to my team. You got your shot. Give Gary Russell a chance to redeem himself. Gary Russell Jr. was barely getting touched. At the same time, dude won on activity. All I'm saying is, you got people sitting up there talking about, well, Gary Russell Jr. need to take his loss like a man. He did take his loss like a man. What I'm saying is, at the end of the day, the man need to get a rematch. And I think that's the right thing for that dude to do. Because like I said, there's never no pressure to give the brothers a rematch. Triple G had a life and death fight with Daniel Jacobs. Refused to give him a rematch. Derbychenko didn't get a rematch versus Triple G. It's always pressure when it's a close fight with the brothers. They got to give somebody a rematch or they a coward. Like I said before, the man went in there with an injury. Man went in there with an injury, had to fight, or he could be possibly stripped of his title. And we know how the WBC is. And like I said before, the WBC need to make right by Gary Russell Jr. and giving him a second opportunity to redeem himself. Because Gary Russell Jr. was getting fights year by year in activity. And then he loses to a guy that more than likely, had he been at least 75%, he would have won. So I don't want to hear about, oh, well, he chose to do this and all this kind of stuff. But everything has circumstances. So that's for that clown that came on here. Well, he chose. Well, you know what? When you make a choice, there's circumstances to everything. And unfortunately for Gary Russell Jr., circumstances. Gary Russell Jr. could have got a fight last year, but the powers that be wouldn't let him get a fight. But what I'm saying is Gary Russell Jr. ain't getting no love. He ain't getting, he ain't getting no love. He ain't getting called a warrior. He ain't getting called nothing. And like I said before, Lomachenko said he had an injury versus Teofimo Lopez. And when he said he had a shoulder injury, everybody, well, see, that's why he performed the way he did. Oh, Manny Pacquiao was injured towards Floyd Mayweather, even though Manny Pacquiao was throwing punches with both hands throughout the fight. Manny Pacquiao never in that fight said that he was hurt. The only thing that was hurt was his pride because he got dominated by Floyd Mayweather. And as far as a rematch go, hell, we had to wait like almost 6 years to get the first fight. So, you know what I'm saying? Oh, nothing, man. Just, putting stuff in perspective about Gary Russell Jr. Got a troll on here, though. I guess he a Mark Maseu fan or something. But I'm not worried about it. You know what I'm saying? But the WBC need to order a rematch. They look out for Canelo. So why not look out for Gary Russell Jr.? Man fought with the man literally fought with one arm. And still managed to make it a competitive fight, but at the end of the day, he just didn't do enough to get the decision. And that's just real talk. But Gary Russell Jr. been Gary Russell Jr. been getting screwed for a minute. Not getting fights. Lack of marquee competition, but now that he lost, it could be marquee competition because they need to give a dude a rematch. We all know that the WBC ain't got no love for guys that look like Gary Russell Jr. They only protect guys like Canelo, where they allowing their fighters to use stuff that's on the banned performance list. So, like I said before, they need to run it back because they always look out for Canelo. They let Canelo make up his own weight classes. They let Canelo make up weight classes several times. I mean, he was literally making up his own weight. Then they took the belt from David Benavidez when David Benavidez was asking for a fight with Canelo. And then Canelo didn't seem to want that fight. And then after David Benavidez was stripped, then Canelo asked for a fight. So Canelo technically didn't fight for all the belts. But like I said before, Gary Russell Jr. need to get all the credit in the world because he went out there and he fought with one arm. Let's see how good Maseu really is. That was weak for him to say, oh, well, it's up to my team. No, it's up to you. If you really want, you going to take advantage and just say, you know what I'm saying? I'm not going to give him a rematch, but you got your shot. Like I said, Gary Russell Jr. represented the WBC with class. He stayed out of trouble. Nothing happened with him outside of boxing. And then Gary Russell Jr. basically, and another thing, Gary Russell Jr. basically had to train himself. He had to train himself for that fight. His dad wasn't able to be ringside because his dad going through some stuff, inactivity. So, you know, all I'm saying is let the man redeem himself. The WBC need to order a rematch. And Maseu need to give Gary Russell Jr. a rematch. And then if he beats Gary Russell Jr. with at least two good hands, hey, case closed. Say what you want to say about Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather ran it back. When people said, hey man, we thought you lost to Castillo, Floyd Mayweather said, all right, I'm gonna run it back. Gave him an instant rematch. Hey man, we thought you lost to close. Ran it back immediately. So why can't pressure be put on Maseu to give Gary Russell Jr. a rematch? Real talk. So like I said, Gary Russell Jr. fought like a soldier, and he should get credit for that. Because Lord knows, if Gary Russell Jr. wasn't Gary Russell Jr., he didn't have melanin in him, they'd be saying, oh, I promise you it would be flip scripted. I promise you the script would be flipped. I promise you people would be like, oh, well, Mark Maseu fought with one arm. Gary Russell Jr. needs to give him a rematch. If Gary Russell Jr. doesn't give him a rematch, he's a coward. So how come that same standard don't apply to Mark Maseu? He won. Yes, he did. He won the fight. Yes, he did. He won the fight. But you don't want to leave any doubts. Gary Russell Jr. is a veteran champion, and they owe it to him to give him a rematch. They owe it to him to give him a rematch. But we know Mauricio Sullivan he really don't care about guys that look like Gary Russell Jr. Because, the WBC, for the most part, is anybody but the brother, because the WBC can't make up their mind whether the franchise championship is a real belt or a fake belt, or just, or just a celebration of, good conduct as a fighter. It basically depends on who they make the franchise champion. Now, one of Gary Russell Jr. brother got a rematch coming up. He got a match coming up with Victor Posa. That's going to be interesting. That's going to be very interesting. Now, y'all do remember Victor Postile. Victor Postile, at one time, he was considered the boogeyman at 140. And you seen what Terrence Crawford did to him when Terrence Crawford got a hold of him. Terrence Crawford whooped him. Then, of course, they tried to discredit Terrence Crawford for that victory. So like I said before, I just want to see Gary Russell Jr. get a chance to redeem himself. Because like I said, he been sitting on the shelf. He been getting shelved. He not been getting fights. This has been going on with Gary Russell Jr., his power struggle with Floyd Mayweather, Al Heyman, and the PBC. This has been going on for years. So like I said, to the clown that was coming on here looking for attention, make sure you keep that same energy when it happens the other way around. And don't come on here talking about you don't see coverage. Get the fuck out of here. Nobody don't care what you like. Get your ass out of here, dude. With your excuses. Oh, dude. Well, that's just how he get. That's how he get down. That might be him, using a ghost account, because that dude got. I ain't gonna say his name, J Dog, because we don't give people like him. We don't give him free publicity. But yeah, dude. That's just how he roll. That's just how he get down. But yes, J Dog. Of course, Gary Russell Jr. deserves a rematch. He literally fought with one hand. So I laugh when these fighters be saying, man, I could beat so-and-so with one hand tied behind my back. No, you can't. You need both hands to win a fight. So don't come on here patronizing about, well, you signed the contract and all that stuff. Well, you can sign a contract all you want, but then there's certain things that can happen under a contract where certain circumstances could put you in a position to do certain things different the first time around. Keep in mind, contracts could be broken. Contracts can be altered. So stop it, please. So, Oh yeah, King Tug. Yeah, I thought King Tug lost. But this is what I've been saying about this is what I've been saying about them. It's really not that big of a difference leaving one promotional company and going to another, according to some people, because at the same time, the PBC, to a certain degree, they favor Hispanic fighters over the brothers. You look at the pay-per-views, they get featured on most of the pay-per-views. But then nobody won't say nothing. Like, hey man, what's up with some of the brothers getting put on the pay-per-view so you can showcase them and build them up? But see, nobody wants to talk about that because, like I said, a lot of these dudes, they're somewhere twiddling their thumbs and stuff and trying to figure out how can they talk around this. Or what they'll do is they'll try to put it on somebody else and make it look like how they do me. They'll make it look like I'm the one that's tripping when actually I'm the one that's coming with the facts. All you got to do is look at the history of the PBC pay-per-views. They don't hardly ever feature no black fighters on their undercards. The only time a black fighter is featured on a PBC pay-per-view if they possibly the main event. This is fact, this is history, this is documents. And you can't dispute what I'm saying. Just because these other dudes out here don't have the guts to say it, that's on them. That's fine. You want to stay in good with them? That's fine. But me, I'm going to do the right thing. At the end of the day, yeah, it's factual that Top Rank could have did a better job with Terrence Crawford. You can't sit up there and deny that. Terrence Crawford is a superstar, and he should have been marketed as a superstar. But at the same time, ESPN don't get let off the hook neither, because ESPN should have been inviting Terrence Crawford to events. They could have been inviting Terrence Crawford to NBA games and featuring Terrence Crawford. They hardly ever brought up Terrence Crawford. So I'm just keeping it a buck. But then at the same time, I'm accused of not looking out for the brothers when I'm always looking out for the brothers. Well, that's the problem. That's the problem. It's only either one black fighter. And a lot of the times it's somebody that ain't really that good, or somebody past their prime. I'm talking about putting marquee up and coming black fighters on the pay-per-views. Dudes that you want to market as a star. So I'm just saying, everybody's, as far as this go, everybody is suspect. And I'm gonna say something else. Real talk. Just on the side note, I'm still interested in Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder. Yes, the fight doesn't have the luster that it had, 4 years ago. But I'm still interested in that fight. I still would like to see that fight. So, I still would like to see that fight just for the sake of the fans. But then again, nobody cares about the sake of the fans. Nobody does. None of these promotional companies. Every time you say, well, how about getting this fight? How about that fight? How about maybe possibly this fight down the line? You either hear, well, it's going to be difficult to make that fight because of the network. How? Or, this dude stay in LA, I'll stay in Miami, so it's impossible to make that fight right about now. It's just excuse after excuse after excuse on why the best fights can't be made. And then you got dudes that co-sign that crap. I'm never going to co-sign the best fights not being made because a fighter is on another promotional company. I'm not ever going to co-sign that. And I'm not ever going to tell a fighter what promotional company to go to get a certain fight. Especially if I'm not on their payroll. Where there's a will, it's a way. Do you think in the 80s everybody was with Top Rank or Don King Promotions? There were other promotional companies. And still the best fights got made. But now we can't get that because you got every fighter trying to follow the Floyd Mayweather blueprint, which is a gigantic payday versus, taking possibly a risk. And that's why boxing is where it is today, and I'm not ever going to co-sign for that. I'm not ever going to co-sign. If these other dudes want to do it, that's on them. But you can count me out. If you feel I don't fit the mold, that's fine with me. But I'm not going to sit up here and play YouTube boxing promoter and tell these fighters, I'm not going to tell a fighter ever how much money he should take. That ain't my place. And I'm not going to do it. I meant every word when I said I'm not ever going to tell Terrence Crawford not to take less than 50% of the purse. Because I'm not ever going to tell another boxer to devalue himself. Now, whatever he decides to get, that should be his own, his own decision. But I'm not going to sit up here as a content creator and tell another fighter what he should take and what he's worth based off the fact that I'm a fanboy of another fighter. Not going to happen. Not going to tell the fighter what promotional company to go to because I'm not on nobody's payroll. When I officially get put on the payroll, then I'll do that. When I start getting a check from the PBC or Matchroom or Golden Boy or Top Rank, then I'll tell a fighter what promotional company to go to. So, like I said before, wrong guy, not going to happen. Too damn bad if you don't like my stance on this. Like I told you, I'm not going to say what you want to hear. So, keep the chitter chatter behind the scenes. All good. So, like I said, after the fight, Gary Russell Jr. said he gonna get better. He said he gonna bounce back. If I see Mauricio Sullivan, I am going to jam him up. I'm gonna jam him up. I'm gonna say, hey man, ain't you guys gonna demand that Maseu give Gary Russell Jr. a rematch? Now, is he the next Manny Pacquiao? Well, I don't know about that. I don't know about that, man. I'm just keeping it. I don't know about that. But it was so funny when Gary Russell Jr. said that he was a little man. Everybody like, oh, he making excuses. He making excuses. But like I said, Lomachenko's excuse is accepted. Manny Pacquiao's excuse was accepted. Anybody else who said they wasn't 100%, their excuse was accepted. But Gary Russell Jr. typical. Just shut up. Don't say nothing. Take your L. So, you know, but anyway. Bro, you ain't put... Dude, what is you talking about? How much you want to bet? How much you want to bet? But anyway, thanks for listening. I'll be back. I'm out.